Can you exploit players just from seeing 1 or 2 showdowns? We're gonna take 4 players and have them play a couple of hands. Then I'll show you how I create a strategy that massively exploits their mistakes in just a couple of seconds. I'll explain why I believe if you're not exploiting, you are leaving a ton of money on the table. All right, let's meet the players. First, we've got Brandt, who plays 1-2 in San Antonio, Kevin, a 1-2 player and YouTuber in New Hampshire, Deepak, who plays 2-5 in India, and Tim, a 2-5 player from Florida. All right, so I had each player play several different hands on several different boards in rapid fire succession. Basically, I wanted to simulate the environment of live poker, and then we edited it and pulled 1 or 2 hands from each player to figure out how we might think about exploiting them. We're gonna start with Brandt from San Antonio. Let's jump in. We have pocket 10s here on the button. We're playing 2-5. Villain is an unknown in the small blind, and we are going to open on the button at $20. Villain is going to 3-bet to 80, and we are going to call. Flop comes Queen 8-5 with a flush draw out there. Now the small blind is going to check it over to us, the pre-flop raiser, and our options in this spot, we can either bet small, we can bet large, or we can check back. So if you just want to spend like 30 seconds, walk me through like your thought process and what you would probably do in game against a player who checked to you from the small blind.
Bet out small here and just continue with the aggression that we were showing, kind of depending how aggressive he is. Re-raising, if he has ace king suited, flush draw, he might raise there. So I think I'd bet small.
Okay, so like 1/3 pot, something like that.
Yeah.
50 here, he is going to call. Turn is a deuce. It just goes check check on the turn, and it goes check check on the river, and we win with pocket 10s against ace king. Okay, so my first observation on Brandt when I see this pocket 10s hand go to showdown is he's probably stabbing too wide. If we take a look here at our handy dandy solver, don't worry, I won't get too into the weeds. We see pocket 10s is supposed to check back somewhere around 80% of the time. Now, can we be sure he's stabbing 10s all the time? No, probably not, but it's already something I'm starting to think about. So let's pay attention and watch one more showdown and see if we can deduce anything else about this player. This time we have pocket 5s on the button. We're gonna open to 20. Small blind's gonna 3-bet, of course, and we are going to call. This time we flop bottom set here in a 3-bet pot, so pretty good for us. He's gonna check it over to us. The options are check, 1/3, or 2/3.
Yeah, so I think I would go 2/3 because there's a lot of draws and combos that he could have in his range that he's going to continue with the flush draws, straight draws out there.
Perfect. So we go 2/3. He calls. Turn, we're just going to barrel again, trying to get the money in. He calls. River's a 3. We put the money in, and he calls. And of course, we are good here with pocket 5s. Aha. So now we see when he had pocket 10s for kind of a showdown value, thin value hand, he stabbed with a small size. And when he had pocket 5s, a very nutted hand, bottom set, he used a big size. So here are some of the exploits I would be considering making right away. So we'll play as the villain in the small blind here. We're going to 3-bet pre-flop, and Brandt is going to call. My first adjustment here, I'm going to consider a range check out of position because this player is stabbing too frequently, and he may just be slightly telegraphing his hand strength with his bet size. And then when I see him use this small size, whenever I have anything that doesn't have any showdown value but has a shred of equity, so maybe a hand like 9-10 of hearts, 6-7 of diamonds, any spade draw, basically anything that doesn't have showdown value here, I would consider check raising right away because his range is just not going to be able to withstand the heat of a check raise here if he is splitting his sizes and putting at least some of his good hands into the big size. When he stabs small, he's just stabbing way too much, and his range is just going to have to do a lot of folding. So this is the point to pounce. If we have anything with a shred of equity, any type of semi-bluff here, we should be check raising a ton, and we are going to get a bunch of folds. Next here, when we see him stab big, and we just don't really have a ton going on, maybe an ace high hand, pocket 9s, pocket 10s, pocket jacks, and under pair to the board, we should just be massively over folding, right? Because generally we could deduce enough information just from 2 showdowns that when he's splitting his sizes, he is not balanced. And to make this exploit, we don't even need to make the conclusion that when he stabs small, he always has a weak hand, and when he stabs big, he always has a strong hand. No, we are just saying that it is more likely than not, he probably has too many strong hands in the big size and probably too many weak or showdown value hands in the small size. So if we have just showdown value here, a hand like pocket 9s, we should be massively over folding. The other side of the coin here, when we have a good hand, when we have pocket 8s, when we have pocket queens, even when we have an overpair here, kings or aces, if we think he can be doing this with sets, top pair, big draws, just good hands in general, we should just be check raising whenever we have a hand that is doing well against that range. So if we have eights, if we have queens, if we have kings or aces here, we should just be piling in the money, and we should be setting up an SPR here where we can just easily get the money in across turns. The number one mistake in this spot, do not slow play when we have a big hand if we know he has a strong range. And I can already see people asking, Mark, aren't you unbalanced in this spot? It does not matter. We are responding to the fact that Brandt is unbalanced, and when he chooses this big size, his range is probably just too strong. He's not going to be folding. He's going to be under bluffing. So we should just be piling in money whenever we have super strong hands that are ahead of that range. The third point, and I think this is the most interesting one, what does it mean when he checks back on the flop? Well, we didn't see him check back on the flop, but we already can take away a few conclusions because he's stabbing a hand like pocket tens that should probably just be checked back almost all of the time. So what does that mean when he checks back? Well, his range is going to be absolutely crippled, right? We saw he just chose the big size when he had a good hand. We saw he chose the small size when he had kind of a showdown value, thin value hand. So that means when he checks back, he's just not going to have enough good hands in his check back range. His range is going to be absolutely crippled. He's not going to be able to withstand heat. So another reason why it's so good to check our range from out of position, because if he does check back on the flop, our bluffs are just going to have license to print across turns. Say we get to this turn with a hand like 9-10 of hearts, I would just be choosing a large size here. If he did check back some type of showdown value hand like ace-8 of diamonds or some type of draw, he's probably going to call one bet. Then we get to the river. We know with pretty high certainty he's just not going to have enough good hands here. If he's betting a hand like pocket tens on the flop, that probably means he's betting his queen X all the time or almost all the time. And so here on this river, we can just go all in. Whenever we have air, we are just going to be able to get a ton of folds on this river, because one of the mistakes players make when they get to a spot like this on the button, when they have a very, very weak range, they need to start calling with very, very weak bluff catchers. But so many players think, oh, I'll just wait for a better spot. Like I'll snap them off when I have queen X or when I have a set or when I have two pair. But the reality is they never get to this spot with queen X or a set or two pair. And so what happens is we end up getting nearly a range fold in the spot because their range is so weak getting to the turn or to the river just because they bet off all of their strong hands on the flop. So when players are overstabbing, when they check back the flop, our bluffs are going to print. So just a little summary here on how we exploit Brandt. Observation 1, he's probably stabbing too wide, so we should consider a range check from out of position. When he stabs small, he's probably just going to have too many weak hands in that range, so we should consider check raising a ton with our bluffs whenever he uses the small size. When he stabs big, it's probably just going to be too strong of a range, so we should just massively overfold. We should fast play our value right now against a strong range. It's just not going to be folding, and he's not protecting his check back because he's stabbing too much on the flop. So when the flop does go check check against a player that's stabbing way too much on the flop, just means their range is weak and our bluffs are going to print. We open pocket fives in the cutoff. Button's going to 3-bet to 60, and we are going to call. Flop comes 6-5-3, so we flop middle set.
Look at that sweet baby there.
And we check it over, and he's going to c-bet small here, and our options are fold, call, or raise. Let me know what you're thinking.
Obviously, it's either between raising and calling.
You're not going to fold?
Putting him on 7-4, that's really high-level stuff, but yeah, I'm going to raise.
All right, so we are going to raise, and what ends up happening here is we barrel the turn, he calls, we make a boat on the river, we put the money in, he calls, and we stack him. This one, we have ace queen. We're going to open the cutoff to 20, button 3-bets. We are going to call. 6-5-3, we check it over. He is going to c-bet small. What are you thinking? We can fold, call, or raise with the ace of hearts in our hand?
I think our hand is good enough to call because we do have showdown value. Having the ace of hearts, I'm definitely not folding yet, so I think I'm going to call.
Okay, cool. We are going to call. Turns at 10, and it actually goes check, check. He checks this one back. Now the river's at 3, so it pairs the board. And on this river now, we have the option of checking it. We can bet small, 110, or we can bet large, 200. So those are the three options. Let me know what you're thinking.
I think in most cases I'm going to check with the intention of probably calling.
River goes check, check, and we show ace queen with the ace of hearts, and we lose this pot to the button. All right, so we saw two hands from Kevin, one where he fast played a set on the flop in a 3-bet pot, and one where he just check called when he had ace queen with the ace of hearts. So what does this mean? So we see here pocket fives are supposed to be check raised. They're supposed to be fast played somewhere around 60% of the time. Kevin check raised 1 out of 1 times. Obviously a small sample. Can we deduce that he's doing it 100% of the time? Probably not. But my overall gut here is the players are just fast playing on this board when they have a strong hand nearly 100% of the time. time, so he's probably fast playing slightly too much. Then we see here when he has a hand like ace queen with the ace of hearts, this hand is actually supposed to be check raise bluffed at a pretty high frequency, somewhere around 34-35% of the time. Again, because he was passive in this spot, can we make the conclusion that he's never check raise bluffing? No, probably not. But from seeing just these two hands, I would probably start thinking that Kevin, like 99.9% of the live player pool, is probably fast playing his value a little bit too much and probably playing his semi bluffs just a little bit too passively. So what does this mean for us? Well, if we had a hand like pocket aces with the ace of hearts, I would already be feeling pretty precarious about this spot. Of course, we have the backdoor nut flush draw. We could still be beating some of his value theoretically. I guess he could be doing this with a hand like tens or jacks or queens, sometime for protection. So aces with the ace of hearts, sometimes I guess we could consider a continue here. But if we did have a hand like black pocket nines, probably would just be considering folding right now. We don't beat any of his value. And yes, we are still ahead of his bluffs, but players are probably massively under bluffing here and they are fast playing their value too much, which means when they check raise here on this flop, they're just going to be weighted towards value way too much. And if we have a bluff catcher where a player is under bluffing, our bluff catchers are in general going to be much more profitable as a fold than as a continue. So if I did have just a hand like nines or tens here, I would probably just be considering throwing it in the muck quite a bit right away. And if we did get to the spot with a hand like pocket sixes for top set, if we had value here that could cooler his value, I would just be piling in all the money, right? Because when he check raises this flop, he's probably going to be under bluffing. He's probably going to be fast playing value too much. There's no reason for us to slow play when we have a very good hand here. Let's just pile in the money against his very strong hands, his big combo draws, his pair plus flush draws, etc. His range is just going to be too strong. He's going to be underfolding if we put the money in on this flop. So now, once again, I want to talk about what it means if hero just check calls on this flop and then we go to a turn. Since they are probably going to be fast playing their value a little bit too much, that means when the turn and the river don't change the nuts, our bluffs are going to print because their range is going to be too weak across turns and rivers because they fast play all their value right now. What this is also going to mean is when the turn brings in a flush completing card or a straight completing card, they're probably going to hit their draws a lot. So we need to proceed cautiously, probably want to consider sizing down or checking on draw completing turns just because they're probably going to play their draws a little bit more passively. So when the draw comes in on the turn or the river, they are going to hit those hands a little bit more than they should in equilibrium. All right, so what we learned about Kevin, probably fast playing value just a little bit too much. So if he does check call on the flop, our bluffs will print across turns and rivers, and probably just going to be a little bit too passive with his bluffs and draws. So we can just overfold to the check raise. And even on boards that are bad for us, we can probably just be c-betting our range, because when players just start fast playing their value too much and playing face up and not check raising nearly enough with their bluffs, they're just never going to be blowing us off our equity. We can get away with just c-betting much more. I would just be c-betting my entire range against players who are fast playing their value too much and playing their draws too passively. All right, so in this one, we have queen jack of hearts. We open in the cutoff to 20, button 3 bets, and we are going to call 6-5-3 with a couple of hearts. We check. He goes small, and with the queen high flush draw, we are going to call here. Turn is a 10, check. He checks it back. Now the river's a 3, pairing the bottom card, and our options on this river are either to check, to bet half pot, or to bet around pot. So walk me through what you're thinking on this river.
All his overpairs are snap calling us. Betting pot here will make really any sense. I think half pot bet makes most sense because some part of his range is ace jack, ace queen, ace kings, which should fold for this size. I'm going half pot here on the river.
Perfect. So we go half pot. He is going to call. Unfortunately for us, he's good. Okay, cool. So we have ace 3 of hearts here, and we are going to open in the cutoff to $20. We're playing 2-5, and a villain on the button is going to 3-bet to 60, and we're going to call with a suited ace. Flop comes 6-5-3, so we flop bottom pair and a flush draw. We could raise, we could call here, but we're going to decide just to call here on the flop because we've got some showdown value with bottom pair. Turn is a 10, we check. Now our opponent checks back, and the river's a 3, so we make trips on this river, and our options on this river, we can either come out and bet half pot, we can bet pot, or we can check it over to our opponent. So let me know what you're thinking on this river.
I like betting pot size here because some of the times these guys show up with an ace queen, ace king, king queen kind of a hand, and they just feel that they have a lot of showdown value and they'll just check it behind. So I definitely am betting here and I'm betting pot.
So we are going to go just under pot. We get called and we are good. All right, so first observations here on Deepak. We see he used a small size after the turn went check when he got to the river with a bluff. And we see he used a big size. He got a little bit more greedy when he got to the river with value. All right, so the first exploit I'm making against players who are going to split their sizes with their bluffs and value on the river is I'm going to be checking back a lot more on turns to bluff catch, because essentially they're turning their hand face up on a lot of rivers, and the more information we have, the bigger our edge, the more profitable of a decision we can make. So if we get to this turn with a very, very strong hand, a hand like tens, I would just always be betting here. I wouldn't be checking those back because we can just cooler a lot of his value. But if we do have showdown value here, if we have a hand like pocket sevens or pocket nines, or even like an ace king high type hand, I would strongly be considering checking back with these hands a lot more on turns, because they are going to make our life very, very easy and very, very profitable on the river. And when we do get to the river and they use this small kind of half pot size, every time we get here with showdown value, when we get here with a hand like pocket sevens, when we get here with a hand like eights or nines or ace king or ace queen high, we are just calling, we're snapping it off. Now, one thing I'll say, you do run into an occasional player here in the cutoff who get to this river with a hand like 5-4 of diamonds or pocket fours or something like that, and they'll just come out and monkey bet on this river. I'm not saying Deepak is doing this at all, but I think the player pool sometimes does this. So if you do face a player who in the cutoff here is kind of just monkey betting with a hand like 5-4 or pocket fours when they get to this river, we can just raise a lot of the time. If we have a hand that doesn't beat second pair or third pair, we can just raise because our range is not going to be strong. It's going to be mostly bluffs, and we can fold out their better kind of bluffs. They may not even know if they have a bluff or value. They're just kind of stabbing. But we can fold out a lot of those hands if we get to this river with ace high. Now, if you're playing against a more reasonable player like Deepak, if we have ace high here, we just call. If we have pocket sevens, we just call. We don't really need to be worried about raising, but that is just the exploit when you're playing against players who are going to kind of monkey stab on this river with a hand like pocket fours. And this one's easy. When you see them come out and bet the river big, obviously they're making our lives easy. They're letting us off the hook. We should be massively over folding here. Even when we have hands like pocket sevens, pocket nines, even when we get here with the top of our range, it doesn't matter that we're folding the top of our range, because when they choose the size, they are just massively under bluffing. And once again, if they are under bluffing, every single bluff catcher is more profitable as a fold than as a call. We have ace six of clubs now in the cutoff, and we're going to open to 20. Villain on the button, 3 bets to 60. We're going to call. We've got a suited ace. We're really deep. And if flop comes 6-5-3, we check. He goes small, and we're going to call with top pair. Offsuit 8 here, we check. He goes pretty big again on the turn. We're going to call here and see what happens on the river. And the river's a king. At this point, we check it over. Pot's 547, and he moves all in for 730. Walk me through what you're thinking here.
My decision here also depends greatly on the capability of this player. I think if it's a very capable player, he will possibly shove his king jacks, king queens as value. I am skewed towards a fold here. I don't think we have enough showdown in this spot. I would tend to fold here.
We're gonna fold. We flash the ace-6 trying to get a little information. Villain wins. He does not show. Usually when they don't show, that means they had it. Next observation about Deepak here, he's probably just massively overfolding on rivers. We're really picking on Deepak today. I'm sorry, Deepak. I genuinely think Deepak is a pretty good player, but this just shows if you can exploit pretty solid players, how much can we be exploiting fish? So we see here ace-6 on this river is supposed to be called somewhere between 50 to 65% of the time. If they are folding this hand on the river, our bluffs are going to massively print. So I want to just kind of combine a couple exploits here and show you guys as a thought experiment what it looks like if number 1, they're fast playing their value a little bit too much on flop, and number 2, they are just overfolding on the river with some of their best bluff catchers. Okay, so let's take kind of a combination of Kevin and Deepak, and let's say on the flop they are fast playing their value a little bit too much. Let's say they're fast playing these sets in 2 pair 80% of the time instead of something like 60% of the time. Now let's say on the river they're folding these bluff catchers just 10 to 15% more of the time. The ace-6 suited, the 7-8 suited, the 7-6 suited, etc. Now we see here, because they're fast playing value just a little bit too much and they're just folding their bluff catchers a little bit too much on the river, we see here that we are just massively over bluffing on this river. Even when we have hands that have bad blockers, they still become very profitable bluffs. Look at a hand like ace queen of hearts here. Ace queen of hearts is just always jamming on this river. Ace jack of hearts, always jamming on this river. Ace four of hearts, jamming on this river. The point here is when we start stringing together exploits and we're able to carry that thread all the way through from the flop to the turn to the river, we can start massively exploiting players. All right, so overall observations on Deepak here, he's probably over bluffing rivers using the small sizing. So we can check back a lot of our more thin or showdown value hands on turns to bluff catch rivers. And again, he's probably under bluffing when he uses the big size on the river. When he goes small, we can call with anything with showdown value. And when he chooses the big size, we should just be massively over folding. And finally, because he was over folding the river to a triple barrel, we should be massively over bluffing rivers. Anytime we get to the river with a hand that does not have showdown value, we should be piling in the money. And yes, are we sometimes going to get called here? Sure. But the most profitable play long term, if a player is just slightly over folding rivers, we should be taking every single hand that doesn't have showdown value and piling in the money on the river, because it's going to be more profitable than giving up. We have Jack 9 of spades here in the low jack. We're gonna open to $20. Gonna fold all the way around to the big blind, and the big blind calls. Now we flop a flush draw here, Jack high. He checks it over, we see bet, he calls. Turn is an 8, so a blank here. We're gonna continue here, we're gonna double barrel, and he's going to call. Now the river's a jack, so we make third pair on this river, and the opponent checks it over. And the options here on this river are to either check it back or to bluff.
I'm checking.
Why are you checking back?
If he's been this sticky already, I think it'd be hard to push him off his hand.
So we are going to check it back. Finally, last player here, we saw Tim check back on the river when he made third pair. So let's talk about this spot. We see Jack 9 of spades here is actually supposed to be bluffed on this river at 100% frequency. And the reason being, on an ace high triple Broadway board, Tim just doesn't have many natural bluffs getting to the spot. We see Jack 9 is supposed to be bluffed on the river. Jack 10 is supposed to be bluffed on the river. Hands like pocket sixes, pocket fives, and 5X are also supposed to be bluffed on the river. He just doesn't get to the river with a ton of natural bluffs, so he has to find some pair hands to turn into bluffs. So what does this mean for us from the villain spot here? When we face a third barrel on the river, obviously we should just be massively over folding here. And a quick tip, ace high boards, triple Broadway boards, particularly from an early position open, just really hard spots to find enough bluffs. These spots are notoriously under bluffed, which is why I chose the spot. So obviously on this river, if we do face a third barrel, we can just be massively over folding. Even if we have top pair here, that hand is now just a bluff catcher, and if they are under bluffing, you guys know the drill. So obviously it's easy to deduce that we should be overfolding rivers if they're under triple barreling, but I think what's super interesting here is what that means about our turn play. What does that mean if they're going to massively under bluff on rivers and kind of play face up? We can actually be calling turns a lot more because they're not going to bluff us off our equity on the river. So if we do have a bluff catcher on the turn, a hand like King X, a hand like 5X, when players are under bluffing rivers, we can float turns a lot wider because they're going to be so face up on rivers. A lot of players are 1 and done or 2 and done, and if they're just going to check back the river and under bluff, we can float turns so much wider. One last note, of all the players you saw in this video, some are pros, some are just weekend warriors, but all of these players are winning players who are serious about poker. And if these type of exploits are there to exploit winning players, how much can you be exploiting the fish in your games? Just some food for thought. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and it turns you into the biggest boy possible. Thank you guys and have a gentle day.